All right, nerds, this week on That Just Happened, we have From Salem's Penguin. I gotta get better with these, I think. And is right, this is reviews for lazy people. This is reviews as I get to them. I have 2 full-time jobs, man. I can't be consuming content all the time. Some weeks we have like 1 thing to talk about on this show. This week we've got 3 things to talk about on this show. Actually, no, I take that back. We've got 4 things. It's just I only took notes on 3 things. We're going to talk about Walking Dead as well. So we've got Salem's Lot, Penguin from the horror series on MGM+, and Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon. So that's what we're talking about this week. Let's get into Salem's Lot, the new movie adaptation of the Stephen King novel that was first made into a movie in like, what was it, 78? I think is when the first movie came out. And then there was the miniseries. There was Return to Salem's Lot in like 83, or 86 rather, which was not good. I also watched that. We're not going to talk about it, but I'm just going to tell you right now, don't waste your time. If you're on Max and you're like, hey, that's related to Salem's Lot, why not watch that? Because it's terrible. The new Salem's Lot, I had high expectations. That trailer that they released, the last trailer they released before it came out, they laid out some promise. Like there was absolutely things about it that were like, all right, I can get behind this. This looks like an interesting take on things. I've never read the Stephen King book, so I don't have any preconceived notions. I vaguely remember watching the mini series when I was a kid, but very, very vaguely, and only kind of in passing because my mom was not a big fan of me watching horror things as a child. So I really had no preconceived notions aside from what was laid out in those trailers, and oh boy, did not quite live up to the trailers. I'm not saying it's bad. It's not very good, but it's definitely not bad. It's just, it's obvious that they over filmed. And by that, I mean, they shot a bunch of material that didn't make it into the final cut. So it makes that final cut feel very wandering and lost, even though like it's only, it's just over an hour and a half, if I remember correctly. So it's fairly succinct in the actual time that it's running in front of your face, but like the things that are missing are very obviously missing. Like there are definitely hard cuts in there that are like, okay, I feel like there's one specific spot towards the end of the movie where they're talking about how they have to stay out of shadows because the vampires can live. Oh, and also spoilers, I guess, if you care about things. I mean, the book is from the 70s. So if you're unaware of the story at this point, that's on you. Anyway, there's a point where they're talking about staying out of the shadows because the vampires can be in the shadows. Even in the daytime, they can be in the shadows, which is key information to have because of the way that the series, or the movie rather, concludes. Like that is necessary information because that explains how the ending happens to a certain degree. But it sounds like they intended on giving us that information much earlier in the movie instead of that casual line that they say at the end of the movie, right before the actual climax happens. So yeah, it was entertaining. It served its purpose on a very basic level as far as that is concerned. But if you are moderately well versed in how movies are made and in the way what good storytelling is, or if you know the original property at all, then you're probably not going to be very impressed. You're probably going to be a little bit disappointed, even if you're a fan of the original book or miniseries or movie. Like this feels like it just doesn't do any of those things justice. Jeremy Johns made the point of, and I think this is a very valid point in his review, he said that in the book, Stephen King wrote Barlow, who's the main vampire. Stephen King wrote Barlow as this amalgamation of the 2 different worlds of vampire we know, that being like the very well-spoken Count Dracula, where he's like a man that is respected because he's powerful, and then he's also this vicious killer. And then the creature vampires, where they don't really talk, like more Nosferatu kind of vampires, which yes, is technically based on Dracula, I understand that. But like just the more primal kind of non-speaking, just tear you to shreds kind of powerful creature vampires. He took those two ideas of what a vampire could be and created Barlow as an amalgamation of both. The original movie from 78 or whatever it was kind of leans more into the more creature-like vampires and less into the well-spoken man about town kind of Anne Rice style vampire. And this movie attempts to do a little bit of both, kind of like Stephen King originally wanted to do. So, I mean, like, kudos for trying, I guess. But the execution is very poor. You do hear Barlow speak in this. In the original movie, you don't. In the 70s movie, he doesn't speak. I can't remember anything about the miniseries, so I don't know if he speaks in that. Though, if it's a miniseries, I would imagine he does. Actually, no, I vaguely remember hearing somebody talking about the miniseries. It's more on the side of gentleman vampire and less on the creature-esque side. So they lean more one way. The original movie leans more the other way. This one tries to split the difference and does it very poorly. You do hear Barlow, like I said, you do hear Barlow speak, but if you don't have your subtitles on your Macs, then you're not going to really be able to understand what he's saying outside of some of the whispers before you actually get the reveal of who Barlow is. And it's, I don't know, it leaves you wanting a lot. Suspension of disbelief aside, the main kid in this is fantastic. Like, if I'm gonna praise this movie for anything, it's for making that little kid kind of a badass, and through determination of will over anything. Like, borderline Mary Sue levels of badass, but like, I don't know, feels more earned than a Mary Sue would. I don't know, but the kid's great. So if you're gonna watch it for that reason, because it's awesome. But aside from that, like, it's really hard to recommend this movie. I can't. If you're a Stephen King fan, you're gonna watch it anyway, so what I have to say has nothing to do with it. If you're a horror movie fan, maybe not. If you're a vampire movie fan, it would be a very, very mild recommend. So that's about all I can do for you. From there, let's move, where'd my notes go? Penguin Season 1, Episode 2. We have moved up in episodes by one. This is the reason that this is noteworthy, this is worthy of the conversation right now, because, I mean, we don't necessarily always go episode to episode with all the shows that we watch, but I wanted to on this one because there's a couple of really awesome things to note here. All of the rogues gallery for Batman, when they're at their best, they're exemplifying an element of Batman himself. And also, they all kind of have an intellect that puts them on some sort of equal footing with Batman. Penguin being one of the few that has very little in the way of other things aside from the whole mafia thing. So he's got money and goons and whatnot and what forth. You don't very frequently, I mean, sometimes you do, sometimes you get this and it's great, but you don't very frequently see how Penguin is an element of Batman. And like I said, when they're at their best, that's what they're doing, is they're reflecting some sort of element of who Batman is. And in the case of the Joker, it's like the opposite of what Batman is. And that's a whole different discussion. But in episode 2 of the Penguin series with Colin Farrell, which, again, this man deserves all of the awards for this show. Holy shit, it's so good. He's so good, very specifically. And then the chick playing Sophia, I can't think of her name. The girl playing the lady, my apologies. The lady playing Sophia Falcone also is starting to show that she's got a lot of range underneath her. She was in the Sopranos show, so she's got a little bit of experience doing the mafia thing. But we are seeing from the character of the Penguin in episode 2, you're starting to really see that he has an intellect that rivals Batman. It's not the same kind of intellect like the Riddler. Like, he's not as educated, he's not as intelligent on an academic level like the Riddler is. He's more, he's streetwise smart. Like, he is that kind of intellect. He can read people really well, which is, again, one of the things that Batman does exceptionally well when he's written well. One of those, that's kind of where Penguin falls when he's done very well in the comic books, is he's shows the street level smarts that Batman also exhibits, and that's how they kind of clash. And this is starting to get into that. We're starting to see just how he cleverly maneuvers his way up through the crime families, and eventually, probably by the end of the season, we'll see him. I very much expect him to eliminate one, if not both, of the crime families. Like, he'll take over the Falcone crime family and then eliminate the Maroni crime family. Like, that's how I think this is going to play out. But I mean, he could just eliminate both of them and start his own situation, which seems unlikely the way they're going, but could be wrong. Also, we're starting to really get into some of the psychosis of Sophia Falcone, which is really, really interesting, because their different interpretation of that character is working. Like, this is another example, I think, of Louis from Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. The TV version of Louis is something that they've never done with that character before, and I think it works better. I think we're borderline into that territory with Sophia Falcone in this Penguin series. Like, this version of the character, I think, works better than what we've gotten in the comic books to a certain degree. I don't know that I'm going to fully commit to that until we get at least another episode or two deep. But as of episode 2, yeah, that's, I think, where we're at with that character. So yeah, I still a recommendation. Absolutely go check out The Penguin. This is going to be an epic conclusion to this series by the time we hit, was it episode 8 or 10, I think is where they're going. Next on the list, we have from season 3, both episode 2 and 3 have come out since we last talked about From. I cannot recommend this series enough. If you are a fan of mysteries and you do not have a queasy stomach, then this show is for you. If you are a fan of horror and you do not have a queasy stomach, then this absolutely is a show for you. This is such a unique take on, like, they're almost like vampires. The monsters, the demons, whatever the hell they are a kind of variation of a vampire. Like, they're more the creature side of vampires, but like, it's this really cool mixture of demon and vampire that doesn't really, it's not the gentlemanly vampire thing. We don't get that, but you do get like the weird, like, sweet old lady that then is just this scary freaking monster. And as of episode 3, the really interesting thing that I wasn't paying as much attention to until probably about halfway through episode 2 of season 3, and really hard into episode 3, is the character of Victor. So if you're just starting the series and you're in season 1, then they slowly introduce you to the character of Victor, and then they expand on who Victor is in season 2, and then in season 3, he becomes pivotal to figuring out what the hell is going on. I'm not going to spoil it much beyond that, just because I really haven't been able to wrap my mind around exactly what's going on. But it's oh man, it is so much fun. And one thing I guess I could say that is not as great in season 3 that I was hoping they would do is basically every episode even in episode 1 of season 1, basically every episode of season 1 and 2 is an anxiety attack. Just like, you don't know what's going to happen next, and it's such a high level of tension the entire time. Like, your shortness of breath, and you're very worried and sweaty, and like, it is very affecting. Episode 2 of season 3 had still an element of that. Episode 1 definitely had that. Episode 2 still had an element of that, but episode 3 had a little bit less of that. And I think that is the element that is changing as we near the end of this story, is that there's going to be less anxiety-driven episodes, because they have to get narrative things out of the way so that we can come to some sort of cathartic conclusion with this. So, oh man, but then the way episode 3 ends, as I knock my drink over, the way episode 3 ends brings that anxiety right back. Like, episode 3 is kind of easy watching compared to the rest of the series until you hit the last minute and a half of the episode and you go, oh my God, please no. Again, I'm not going to spoil it beyond that, but holy shit, at the end of episode 3, you just go, oh, everybody's dead. They're all going to die. So that's where we're going to leave that one. Absolutely recommend From. If you're not watching it, you should be, especially now that it's Halloween time. I don't think it's for free on Amazon anymore, so you have to pay for it on Amazon. Or if you have an MGM Plus account, then you can watch it there. And then the final thing we're going to talk about is The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon, episodes 1 and 2. Yes, episodes 1 and 2 both have come out, and I have watched them both. And I'm very mixed about this, because even still, I still feel like this is the best of the spin-offs from the Walking Dead franchise. So if you haven't watched season 1 of the Daryl Dixon spin-off, that is as good as The Walking Dead gets. Like, I think there is very little about that show to complain about. Just because it's all about people being monsters in this weird monster-filled world. Like, that's just, it's just such a really cool juxtaposition. Because the monsters are a known quantity. It's the people you have to question the entire time. And that season really, really highlights that element of the storytelling that you get from Walking Dead. Season 2 does that as well, but subverts it a little bit, because primarily the people that we follow in The Walking Dead, the main characters, the main cast, because it is an ensemble, but the main cast of characters, like almost all of them, if not all of them, because I would have to go back and rewatch to kind of say this for certain, but I can say with relative certainty that the main cast of characters are good guys. You don't really have to question their motives. You know that they are out to basically make the world a better place after the zombie apocalypse has happened. So that is very rarely, if ever, in question in any of the other spin-offs and in any of the seasons of the primary show. In season 2 of Daryl Dixon, there's a little bit of question as to what the hell Carol is doing. For those that don't know, season 1 is all Daryl Dixon. He's in France, and you find out how he got there, and like there's a whole lot of shady business going on because it's The Walking Dead and people are gross. So yes, that is season 1. And then season 2 starts and we see Carol. We're introduced to Carol in episode 1, season 2. And you know a bit about what her plans are. You know exactly what she wants. She wants to find Daryl. And her methodology, while we did see this a bit in the main series, it just feels a little less... It feels a little less like you know that she's a good person. And I think it's kind of to the credit of the actress who plays her. I can't think of her name right now, and I apologize. That she can do that with the subtlety that makes you uneasy watching her do what normally you would understand, like this is what she must do in order to get to her ends. But like the gray area is a lot bigger with the world at large, because the world at large is a lot bigger, but also because we're this deep into this franchise, that I feel like she gets a little bit closer to the dark side of that gray area, and it's just really interesting to watch. I don't think that it necessarily is degrading the quality, it's just subverting expectations in a way I wasn't expecting, so it's hard to get around that. It's hard to get like my brain to accept these as facts. So still absolutely a recommend. Like I cannot see this being something that I'm not going to enjoy every episode of. But as it stands right now, it's hard to make out what is going on in the mind of Carol, and by design, I would venture. So 100% recommend for Walking Dead. But that is what just happened for me. For you, what just happened? What have you interacted with since we last spoke? Let's talk about that down in the comment section. What is going forward for you? Coming soon, happening soon, as it were. For me, there is not this coming week, so we'll probably just be talking about more movies and TV shows this week, coming up next week. But the week after, I do have a concert, so we'll be talking about some music stuff then. It is Benjamin Todd, if memory serves correctly. So we'll be talking about a little bit of country music. That's pretty cool. And yeah, we have Halloween, so we're going to be ramping up a lot of the scary season stuff. And I think that's all we got happening soon. So what is on your list of things to knock out? Let's talk about that down in the comment section as well. Thank you very much, nerds, for sticking around to the end. I appreciate your faces. Let's have those conversations down in the comment section. I will see you next time. If you haven't been watching the main show, then maybe you should go check out the main show for all of the news that has to do with pop culture. And until then, don't forget, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here. And that just happened.